Luis Matos may not have been spectacular last season, but it was easy to see in flashes why Fangraphs graduated him as the number 12 prospect in all of baseball. Now, going into this season, I just made my roster predictions for opening day yesterday, and I didn't have him on it. So I'm going to explain in more detail why I made that difficult decision next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015. I've been hosting this show coming up on 5 years, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Check us out there if you have not already, and please hit that subscribe button and that thumbs up button wherever it is that you're following the show. And coming up on today's show, I just want to give this a little bit more time, because this is something, I feel like we go through something like this every season, but this year, the situation is regarding Luis Matos, and the fact that he's having a great spring. He's a future piece for this team. He's just 22 years old. He, like I said, he just turned 22 in January. And like I said, Fangraphs graduated him as the Giants' number 1 overall prospect and the number 12 overall prospect in baseball last season, based on the way he was just destroying AA and AAA. And when I look at the numbers, and then you look at the spring performance, and you look at the fact that he came into camp having added what have we heard, 12 to 14 pounds of muscle, it is really it was the hardest decision I had to make when projecting the opening day roster to keep him off of it. And so I'm just going to kind of try to explain my reasoning for that, and that it's not an indictment on Luis Matos whatsoever, and that I just think in the course of a baseball season, especially when you're looking at some of the guys who figure to break camp with the team who are in the outfield, they have injury histories. And so guys get hurt. In a baseball season, it is so long. Guys get hurt. He is the first in line probably to get an opportunity. And look, guys could still get hurt in spring training, and this could all be a moot point. If there's an injury to Michael Conforto, there you go. Luis Matos is going to be the first in line to get that opportunity, probably to be an everyday player. And I think that he's not long-term a guy they view as a platoon player. I do think there's some confusion about players like Joey Bart and Elliot Ramos and the way that they've been handled. But I think Luis Matos is different. I think Marco Luciano, to an extent, is different. And several other players who are going to come up through their system, Kyle Harrison, different in that they just view them in a higher regard than they ever did with Bart and with Ramos, for example. And so not every young player is going to be treated that way, in my opinion. Look at just look at Luis Matos's playing time last season. When he came up, he wasn't just being strictly platooned. He got a ton more opportunities than Elliot Ramos ever got, and there's a good reason for that. They believe in him, and so do I, more as a prospect than they believed in Elliot Ramos, just to give an example. But the reason I had to keep him off my opening day roster was simple, but yet not easily accepted by many, I think. And that is that simply you only have 13 spots on your roster for hitters, and a bunch of those spots are automatically accounted for. And so I won't go through, obviously catcher, first base, second base, shortstop, third base. But then when we're talking about the outfield, you just signed Jung Hoo Lee to a $113 million contract. Of course, he's not going anywhere. And then Michael Conforto has a track record. I know he did not have the greatest season last year, but they're paying him $18 million this year. And he has a track record of a .353 lifetime on base percentage, .457 lifetime slugging. Like, if Luis Matos could put up those kinds of numbers, that would be just a huge, overwhelming success for the Giants. And that's what Conforto has done in his career. And I'll kind of save the main point for just a minute when we talk about then Mike Yastrzemski and Austin Slater. I get a lot of heat for bringing these guys up over and over as players who I think should be on the roster ahead of Matos. And it has nothing to do per se with in a vacuum, if I was like drafting players, who would I pick? It's not about that. It's about their contract status and their optionability or lack thereof. And so none of those players outside of Luis Matos can be sent to the minor leagues. Actually, I mean, technically, could Mike Yastrzemski be sent to the minor leagues? I think that he could. But the thing is, he's not going to. And part of the thing is that Austin Slater, who cannot be sent to the minor leagues because he has more than 5 years of service time. First of all, what a slap in the face that would be to send Yaz, who's been just a serviceable, competent, slightly above average major league contributor essentially since he showed up with the Giants, especially against right-handed pitching. I get it, platooning less this season under Bob Melvin, but not entirely non-platoon. Bob Melvin was manager of the A's, platoons there. Manager of the Padres, there was platooning there. And so Slater does very well against left-handed pitching, cannot be optioned. Yastrzemski does quite well against right-handed pitching, plays a very good right field, and is a good base runner, And so there's just nobody there who it's worth like essentially getting rid of just to give Matos an opening day opportunity, in my opinion, because Matos has minor league options. He's 22 years old, and injuries and underperformance happen no matter what. Like, they happen every year, and that's how you get your opportunities. And that's how Matos got his opportunity last year, and he ended up with 253 plate appearances. Now, I would take the over on that in 2024. I think he's going to get more opportunities. And you hope for a guy like Conforto maybe to rebuild some value and he becomes a trade candidate because his contract is up at the end of the year. And so a lot of people say, well, put in Matos over Slater, but then you're kind of pigeonholing him into a platoon because that's what Slater's role is. And so if Matos is taking over Slater's spot, then Matos is being put into a platoon and Slater's already elite in that platoon. That's what he does well. And so I have a hard time. Like, this is not an easy argument for me to make. I just think that there's not really much harm that comes from starting the season this way. And again, a late spring injury to Yaz, even Slater or Conforto or Jung Hoo Lee, any outfielder. And then even at DH, like, it could possibly mean Conforto shifts to DH and it opens up a spot for Matos. It could mean Flores moves to DH and then it doesn't open up a spot for Matos. But even then it could because it opens up a roster spot. So injuries just happen so much. You end up needing that depth. And so I'm not going to get rid of a guy like Conforto. Just trade him now unless I'm just extremely confident in Luis Matos's ability to hit the ground running. Because if he doesn't, then suddenly you've gotten rid of Michael Conforto, and then say you want to option Matos because he struggles, then what? You're basically down 2 players when you could have kept both of them. Now, you don't want to play Matos because he's struggling, and you don't have Conforto as a fallback option, and then you've got to go further down on your depth chart. And so it's really a matter of like protecting inventory and knowing for a fact that you're going to need to dip into your depth, and that he's right on the cusp. He's like that next guy up. He's 22. They're not wasting his talents. He's going to get an opportunity, and it's going to be early. And it could be as early as the start of the season if there's an injury. So anyway, I just wanted to clarify my thoughts on that. And coming up in just a minute, the Padres, they made a blockbuster trade, which is par for the course for them. How does it impact the Giants? I think that it does, and we will get into why in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode is brought to you in part by Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. And Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels lets you dive into all of the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on the latest in the world of sports, March Madness, NBA, MLB, and lots more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, and cooking videos as well. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Today's episode is brought to you in part by our good friends over at FanDuel. That's right. Say goodbye to busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. So I'm on the FanDuel website right now. There's so many games going on at this moment in time, at this very moment, and then all throughout the rest of the day. And if your first bet of $5 wins, you get 200 in bonus bets. So you can simply take the most lopsided kind of bet there is, and if you win, you get that 200 in bonus bucks. So just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Again, FanDuel.com/LockedOn, and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. All right, here we go. We're going to discuss, surprise, surprise, the Padres made a blockbuster trade, and they ended up with a really good starting pitcher in Dylan Cease. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, tomorrow, it's a mystery bag. We're either going to be dipping into the million leftover mailbag questions that I have, all of them still topical as not much has changed since the last time we asked for them, or we're going to be crossing over with one of our favorite hosts from the National League West. So be on the lookout for that tomorrow. By the way, as you know, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. And hey, baseball fans, mark your calendars for March 20th at 4 p.m. Pacific for the best MLB season preview coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. On March 20th at 4 p.m. Pacific time, be the first to get local insight from the MLB local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Find it on March 20th at 4 p.m. Pacific on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Of course, I make I don't want to say special appearance, but you'll find me on that show as well. So be sure to check it out. So the Padres got Dylan Cease, and as soon as I swear to you, as soon as I saw the Padres were among the teams interested in Dylan Cease, and this was like a new development that came out in the last day. Basically, I saw that yesterday. I was like, okay, they're the front runners and they're probably going to get him, because that's just how AJ Preller is. As soon as you see like a legit connection between the Padres and one of the top talents mostly in trades, but also in free agency a lot of the time, they end up getting the guy. Like, credit to them, they end up getting the guy. Has it worked out? Sometimes. And other times you get Juan Soto and then you trade him away a year and a half later. But part of the return they got for Soto, they ended up using in this trade to get Dylan Cease. So they're just constantly wheeling and dealing. I think behaving a little bit more in a lot of ways like Giants fans would like the Giants to behave. But at the end of the day, Padres haven't had necessarily a lot more success in the last several years, despite this totally kind of star-studded roster that they've had at times. Last year, they won just 3 more games than the Giants with all that talent that they had. But fact of the matter is they get Dylan Cease under club control for 2 seasons. ERA doesn't look great from last season, 4.58, but you look at the season before, it was 2.20. And I don't know, you combine those two, I think there was a lot of weirdness in some of the, I don't want to call it luck, but you combine the two, he's got a 3.37. I think that's kind of maybe more where the talent level is. 3.40 fielding independent pitching over those last 2 years as well. The White Sox defense hasn't done him any favors. Padres defense is much better. So the Padres got a really good pitcher. And basically my question is, or takeaway is, the Padres got better, and they were right in the thick of that kind of on paper third wild card race, or just however you, whatever. I don't want to say hate. Hate is a strong word, but we don't know who the teams are going to be at the end of the season and what position they're going to be in terms of the wild. Like, it's hard enough to know who the wild card teams are going to be, let alone to know what order they're going to be in. There's always surprises. A lot of people expected the Padres to maybe win the division last year, and they finished 18 games back of the Dodgers. And so just goes to show you. But the Padres kind of separated themselves a little bit from this pack of teams that was right around where the Giants are in terms of projections, which is right around 82 wins. And that's why I've been pushing for a signing of a starting pitcher like a Blake Snell or Jordan Montgomery for essentially the whole offseason. And at this point, if they were to sign either of those guys, I don't think either of them would be ready for the start of the season. And Alex Cobb is ahead of schedule. And if he comes back and then Robbie Ray comes back, suddenly you've kind of got a logjam of starting pitching. Although you could then trade from your depth of starting pitching and insert some of your younger players. Or you could trade some of your younger players for more talent at the deadline. So it's not to say they shouldn't add any starting pitchers at this point. I think with Snell and Montgomery still out there, the Giants should absolutely be lurking. And the main point I want to make is that for teams like the Yankees, for teams like the Padres, the Yankees, they were involved too on Dylan Cease, from what we understand. And the point to make here is that they pay 110% tax on every dollar spent right now. And so if you give Snell $30 million a year, that means that in 2024 you'd be paying him like 60 plus $million instead of $30 million. And so for a team like the Giants, that doesn't apply. And so therefore we're getting reports that I think are accurate that there's very little chance that the Yankees go out and get one of these big name starters. And so then who's left as legitimate suitors for these guys? And I think the Giants are one of not that many teams. Although if the prices drop, then all of a sudden you could see other teams enter the fray here. But for the Padres, making this trade kind of indicates to me, I could be wrong, they could just go all out like they've done in the past, trade for Cease and go sign a Blake Snell or something, or re-sign a Blake Snell. Like that wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility, but it does seem to me more like the Padres are looking to kind of cut back on spending a little bit and acquiring a player like Cease, who is not yet a free agent and is kind of cost controlled and under $10 million right now, underpaid. That's how arbitration works. It seems to me that that's why they went the trade route as opposed to the throw a bunch of money at Blake Snell or Jordan Montgomery route. And so I maintain if the Giants want to get a frontline starter, just buy one. Don't give up a package that Alex Pavlovich compared to Carson Whisenhunt and last year's first-round pick Bryce Eldridge and more in order to trade for a starter when you can just simply throw money at them. It's not our money, but those players affect our future as fans more than the money that gets spent. And so my preference is always for the teams, especially when the players are out there. It's one thing if there's nobody out there and trades are the only route left, but I'm also not convinced at this point at all that they're going to end up signing one of those guys. But as this lingers, you start to wonder what kind of price could you maybe be able to get them for. And so that makes them potentially more intriguing if you're able to get like a pretty significant bargain on two of the better pitchers in our game. So coming up in just a minute, we're going to turn our attention to the Giants making a number of roster cuts. They optioned some players, and we've got injury updates. The latest on the state of the Giants as we are 2 weeks away from the regular season getting going in San Diego. And we'll discuss it in just a minute. And before we do, all right, here we go. That's right. We're going to discuss our good friends. And this episode is brought to you in part by them. They are Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, which, in my opinion, put your odds pretty low, including pros and sharks, you pick simply more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. And this is music to my ears. Prize Picks is the best way to get in on the action on sports in more than 30 states, including, that's right, California. Prize Picks available in California. They also offer Apple Pay, a California company, for quick and easy deposits into your account this basketball season, this baseball season, just simply more than or less than. Putting my skills to the test on Prize Picks this season is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $1,000 with just a few taps. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match like I did up to $100. Again, download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with Prize Picks. All right, here we go. We're going to provide some updates on the state of the roster. The Giants continue to make cuts as they move towards opening day, when they will eventually have to trim down to that 26-man roster. Notably, Luis Matos still in camp, so it's not like they've shut the door on that possibility yet. But yesterday, they did make some moves. So they optioned Wade Meckler. And so that was the one player who got optioned. The difference between being optioned and being reassigned to minor league camp is pretty simple. Optioned means you're on the 40-man roster, and so they're using up one of your minor league options by doing this. And I think there's a little bit of confusion about the rules here. I don't blame you when you say he has options, and they used an option. Players get 3 options, but we're talking about 3 years worth of options. And within each year, I forget what the limit is. There used to be no limit, really. There's a limit by virtue of the season's not infinite. But now there's a limit. 5 or 6 times a player can be sent up and down. So they used one of Wade Meckler's option years here, assuming he stays down for a certain amount of time. And it's option number 1 of several that gets counted into his 3 option years. And this would be the first time or the second. Like, once he got called up last year, did he? I think he did get sent down at some point. So this would be perhaps the second option year already for Wade Meckler. And so it's kind of important that he's a guy who's going to be in the mix to get plate appearances as the season goes on due to inevitable injuries and or underperformance. So they also cut right-handed pitcher Tommy Romero, infielder Yoshi Tsutsugo, infielder Trenton Brooks, infielder of notorious fame Donovan Walton, and left-handed pitcher Carson Wisenhunt, who is just a little bit behind schedule, but Wisenhunt very much a name to keep an eye on and somebody that we could definitely see as the season goes on. And then going back to March 11th, they cut 11 players from camp. Catcher Cooper Hummel, right-hander Trevor McDonald, left-hander Eric Miller. That one was a bit surprising. Outfielder Elliot Ramos. That one surprised some people. Didn't surprise me. If I can't fit Matos onto my roster, how am I fitting Elliot Ramos? Ramos is behind Matos on the depth chart, despite seniority. Clearly, they don't believe much in Elliot Ramos, just to state it plainly. Like, the fact that he hasn't been given much of an opportunity isn't just because they don't like giving young players opportunities. It's because they just don't happen to particularly believe in Elliot Ramos, just to state it plainly, just like I said all along with Joey Bart. And now Joey Bart, he's out of options, and he's going to end up not with the Giants anymore, assuming Patrick Bailey and Tom Murphy make it through to the end of camp healthy. Although Bailey's a little bit banged up, it doesn't seem like a long-term injury. They also, did I say optioned? Are these options? They're not all options. Some of them are guys. Certain guys are on the 40-man, certain are not. Randy Rodriguez, I believe he is on the 40-man, was optioned. So is Kai-Wei Tang. He was optioned. And Brett Wisely. So yes, all of those players were optioned. They additionally cut or reassigned to minor league camp Hayden Birdsong, a right-handed pitcher, Jose Cruz, a right-handed pitcher, Yusniel Diaz, an outfielder, right-hander Carson Seymour. So those 4 were reassigned to minor league camp. So Miller was perhaps a little bit surprising because he's a left-handed pitcher, and they, outside of Taylor Rogers in the bullpen, don't necessarily have an answer. I think that we're looking at Ethan Small. You're looking at like maybe 3-4 guys in the bullpen who might be some unfamiliar names to Giants fans. And you're looking at a very inexperienced starting rotation. And so they're putting a lot of their money on inexperienced pitching to start this season, it looks like, unless they make some last-minute moves, which they've been known to do in the past. So the other updates, of course, like I said, Bailey injured his hand. It's a hand contusion. Thankfully, no fracture. Alex Cobb, I mentioned this the other day, but appears to be way ahead of schedule. He threw to hitters, and the next step is to appear in games, I believe. Keaton Winn, this is a big one, like appear in spring games, and he could return supposedly maybe at some point in April. And so that is way ahead of schedule, and it could influence their thinking when it comes to potentially adding a starter or not. Keaton Winn had right elbow soreness, but he's trending in the right direction and believes that he will be ready to go by opening day and figures right now to be in that starting rotation, along with another unproven young player or two. I mean, Kyle Harrison, and then maybe Mason Black as well. Very inexperienced. I like the guys. I like the pitchers, but very inexperienced. And so Kai Wei Tang also on his way back from a left oblique strain, and he was optioned, but he is scheduled to throw. He was scheduled to throw in a minor league game yesterday on March 13th. So those are your updates, and that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked on Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, tomorrow, like I said, either we're going to be doing mailbag questions or we're going to be speaking with a surprise guest from the NL West, another NL West host on the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out so much. So thank you in advance, and thank you to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.